So the disciples are hiding from the Jews, as John says. And when we hear that kind of language, I feel the need always to pull out my drum and beat it. That when John says the Jews, he is not referring to all Jews or something like that. This is not an anti-Semitic text. He actually has a group in mind. And if you ever read through John, you'll see it. He's referring to the Jewish leadership of the temple, which resides in Jerusalem. Those are the people that the disciples are afraid of. They're the ones that were corrupt. They got Jesus executed as an enemy of the state. And the disciples had a really good reason for hiding from them. It was well known that if you have a movement that is dangerous, and it is led by a certain charismatic leader, and he has a following, if you take him out, you run the risk of that movement continuing unless you also take out the inner circle, the lieutenants or something like that, which would be the disciples. And especially there would have been one disciple in particular that would be in danger, and that would be the obvious successor to Jesus, which isn't Peter, but Jesus' brother, or half-brother as it were, James. So they're all hiding because their leader's been executed as an enemy of the state. They are legitimately in danger. They're afraid. Their leader, their guy that they knew to be the Messiah, is dead. And all of a sudden, he appears to them in the room. Now, they had heard from some of the women that his tomb was empty, and they don't really know what that means yet. And then there is Jesus. He appears in a room that was locked. John is very careful to say it's a locked room. Now, how did Jesus get in there? No idea. Ask him. I have no idea. And he appears and he shows his scars that he received while being crucified as a way of proving that it was him. And as you might imagine, they are overjoyed, still trying to piece some of that together, but they're excited nonetheless. Now, Thomas, one of Jesus' 12 disciples, wasn't there. And we aren't told exactly why Thomas isn't there, but I have a guess of sorts. We don't know much about Thomas, but we do know that he was very loyal to Jesus. Earlier, Jesus was insistent on traveling to Judea. He says, I've got to go to Judea. And his disciples are going, no. They want to kill you there. That's not a good idea, Jesus. And Jesus insisted. And it was Thomas who had said, well, we might as well go and die with him. He has this kind of devotion or loyalty to Jesus. He kind of gets who Jesus is, and he is reminded, as we also heard, he makes this profound statement about who Jesus is later. So I kind of wonder if Thomas is just lost. The Messiah, his rabbi, who had been executed, I mean, that was his world, and now he's just, who cares? What difference does it make? Maybe that loss hit him really, really hard, and so he couldn't bear to be with his brothers. So he misses out on that part, and eventually he makes his way to the disciples, and they're still hiding in the room as they should be. They're still in danger by this point, and they're saying, "We've seen Jesus." And Thomas goes, "Yeah, out of your mind. Are you kidding me? No. Unless I see the scars that we saw him receive, I will not believe." And in Greek, it's emphatic, heme pistoso. It means like, I do not believe, and that reality will continue into the future forever, unless I see these scars. Now, we shouldn't fault Thomas, because his reaction makes a lot of sense. We are used to death being final. Thinking about my own life and my most recent loss being, I guess, my grandmother. And you know, you wait for that call, you know it's coming, she's sick, she's about to pass, your phone rings, and you feel that moment bottom out because you know you're not going to see her again. That we just know in our bones that there's this finality to death, that is it. because the dead don't rise. Have you ever known somebody who was dead and was risen from death? Not resuscitated, that's different. But no, I don't. So we shouldn't fault Thomas, because in his world, most people didn't even believe that you could rise from the dead. They didn't even think it was possible. And I'm talking like the Greeks and Romans. We tend to think of ancient people as naive or superstitious, but that wasn't the case. They were pretty skeptical. And there's been some really groundbreaking work done in the last 15, 20 years looking at like belief in resurrection all throughout the ancient world. And the consensus, except for a tiny minority, is that it doesn't happen. So in all of those like random Greek and Roman plays and texts that maybe you were forced to read in high school or college, like the rare moment that it comes up, it's always in the context of, well, we all just know that doesn't happen. And the only exception is this small group of Jews called the Pharisees and their subgroups. The settlement of Qumran, they're the ones who were responsible for the Dead Sea Scrolls. They believed that resurrection was possible, but it was always going to be in the future, like when God vindicates his people and raises everybody. The idea of one person rising from the dead here and now is not in their worldview. It is not possible. That is not how things are going to play out. So they say to Thomas, like, hey, Thomas, we've seen him. And Thomas goes, you're out of your mind. That concept is striking, and it is weird. And I got a good example of how weird that can be from my own life. Several years ago, I was at a conference in Phoenix, Arizona with a friend of mine, Carl, actually one of my best friends. And just by virtue of weirdness, Carl, we went to seminary together. He's a pastor. He was Pastor Christensen's associate pastor before he came out to Orange. So those webs get all interwoven. But anyway, Carl and I are sitting on the bus. The church buses us to their conference site. And up steps, on the next stop, a friend of ours, Chris. He was a seminary student with us, a great guy. And we're like, Chris, hey. And he's like, hey, guy. And then he just gets this scowl, like just this weird look on his face, which is very odd for him. He's a very kind guy. He's like, hey, guys. Okay, like very standoffish, very kind of whatever. That's not like Chris. So he sits down next to Carl. I was sitting in front of them, and we were catching up. How's ministry going? How's your family? And he was discerning a call to another church, which is always hard. And we're talking, and the whole time, he's just like, okay, like just very, very distant, not like him. So finally he goes, hey, Eric, so you did have cancer when you were in seminary, right? I was like, yeah, I got leukemia like 5 weeks after we started. I heard you died. I was like, no. Sorry to disappoint. It was just this weird, so he walked onto the bus and saw somebody that, from his point of view, he knew to be dead. And there I was sitting there on the bus, as goofy as I normally am. And it was weird. It was not exciting. It was uncomfortable. And I think that that's a little bit of what's going on with the disciples, and especially Thomas. Like, this isn't supposed to happen. This is not the way the world works. No. Don't tell me that he's alive, because we know that's not going to happen. And then so sometime later, about a week, Jesus again comes through the locked doors, and I have no idea how, and there he is. And you can imagine Thomas, like my friend Chris, going, I know you to be dead, but there you are. And what does Jesus do? He gives Thomas exactly what he asked for, because it turns out that is what he needed. He says, look at my scars. Stop doubting, but believe. Now, that's a little strange, because in my experience, the things that we say we want and the things that we actually need tend to be pretty different. But in Thomas' case, there you have it. And then, in a really fast turnaround, Thomas gives the most concise confession of who Jesus is in all of the Bible: my Lord and my God. you will not find Jesus described in fewer words, my Lord and my God. That is not the confession of somebody who's just kind of on the fence of this whole Jesus thing. That is somebody who has been smacked in the face by God doing something completely surprising and completely unexpected and struggling to deal with it. Now, if you remember when the disciples were talking to Thomas saying, oh, we've seen Jesus, and Thomas is like, no, you haven't. Don't do that. That's weird. The disciples, in the face of Thomas's doubt, don't hush him up. They don't say, no, don't talk about those doubts. That's not real. No, you just need to have faith. You've just got to believe. No, we don't doubt here. We're followers of Jesus. Doubt has no room in faith. You can't wonder about things. Yeah, so this is surprising and hard to understand, but you just have to accept it on faith. They didn't. They made room for his doubt. And I think this is really important because the church typically does not do well in the face of doubt. That when its its members, I'm not just talking about St. Paul's, I mean everywhere, when its members have life experiences or they encounter things in the world and discoveries, or they read the Bible and realize it is a complicated, hard to understand body of writing, and they find themselves going, I don't know what I believe. I don't know how to believe this. I don't know what this means. The church has a tendency to get very skittish, very insecure. And people, I've seen it before where somebody starts to doubt and they're expressing their doubts and the other person is going, no, you just have to have faith. They get almost insecure, which actually says more about the person listening than the person who is expressing their doubts, for what it's worth. We don't do a good job of leaving room for the fact that we are finite human beings. And if God has given us the gift of faith, well, we're still human, and to be human is to doubt. We don't have it figured out. And the thing I love about Thomas is it's this striking reminder of the fact that it was okay to express that doubt. That when Jesus appears before Thomas and says, ta-da, or whatever he says when he appeared, he does not say, Thomas, how dare you? You were going to die for me or die with me, and here you are doubting. No. Jesus gives himself. And he doesn't sit there, which I've heard this, I've done it if I'm going to be honest with myself. He doesn't give like a long series of axiomatic statements to prove that God is real or Jesus is who he says he is or he really did rise from the dead, as if pure logic will assuade him. Though next week when we talk about the road to Emmaus, something like that does happen. But instead he gives to Thomas himself. Rather than trying to prove things or to try to just ease his doubts because he's feeling insecure about it or something like that, he gives himself in love. And that is, I think, really, really important. Because we have a tendency to freak out. We don't want to be a congregation in faith that can't handle the doubts of our members. Because we all will struggle with our faith. And I've noticed throughout the biblical witness that God, and I realize this might be an odd thing to say, but God does not strike me as somebody who's insecure. As though, they don't believe me, or they have doubts about whether or not I'm good and faithful. I'm so offended. No, that doesn't sound like Jesus either. As though if we are having struggles, if things don't make sense, and there's a lot of things about the Christian tradition that are very hard, it's not as if God is offended, but rather God gives himself. And the power of the story of Thomas is that God is not afraid of our doubts. To doubt is human. That God is the author and perfecter of our faith. If he's the one that gave us our faith in baptism, then he is the one who will continue to give himself and continue to walk through us, or walk with us and work through us. And as I've found in my own life, the periods of intense doubt and struggle have always ended over time, and sometimes very painfully, with periods of great faith. Even though what I thought I wanted is not what I really wanted, Jesus has always, as he has promised, given him himself. And the worst thing you can do, the most dangerous thing you can do, is to not be honest about the doubts and the struggles that you have. That when you come up against something that is just breaking you apart, to try and push it away because doubt is a scary thing. As a pastor, if I get a phone call or I'm talking with somebody, and this has had happened plenty of times where somebody has just said, man, I am so angry with God. I don't understand. I'm generally not worried about that person because they're talking about it. They're vocalizing it. And God, in his infinite wisdom, is okay with that struggle. My prayer is that we will be a community that is not afraid of the doubts and the struggles that come with a life of faith, but rather we would rest and we would rest in the fact and know the fact that Jesus offers himself to our doubts, that he is always transforming us to a life of greater faith, but that is his promise to do for us. And it is simply our task to follow. Let us pray.